Hey, this is Mark Washington from MTC Media. Talking about that North Carolina-Alabama game last night. Certainly, probably the game of the tournament thus far, and how coaching and philosophy won that game for Nate Oates last night. And it was because they forced Carolina into something that Carolina did not have the pieces to do. So we're going to concentrate going down the stretch. We're going to concentrate going down the stretch of that game and how Oates dictated to Hubert Davis. And a lot of it was defensively, North Carolina could not stay with Alabama because Alabama successfully made enough threes and enough plays off the bounce from the perimeter that North Carolina was not in help a lot. They were not in the proper places for helps. They were afraid to leave their man, especially a guy like Griffin and Estrada having the game that he had. And for us who saw Estrada up close at Hofstra, we knew what he was capable of, you know. And that really dictated to Carolina what they could do. And what it ended up doing was it impacted the decision-making of Carolina that hurt them on the offensive end. So if we go back to it, let's go back to the ACC tournament. When Elliot Cadeau started being exploited by opposing teams, by them standing 2 and 3 and 4 feet back. And again, I've said this before in another video, Cadeau will eventually learn how to attack space. He's not very good at it, and 18 and 19-year-olders usually aren't. It's a skill that he'll learn how to. If you want to talk to someone about that, talk to a guy like Ed Cota. Ed Cota, where teams would slump off of him, he understood how to attack space, how to get his angles there to make him a more effective player. He was one of the ones who was successful at it. So going back to the ACC tournament, what you saw North Carolina do a lot of, they would close games with R.J. Davis and Seth Trimble in the backcourt. And that's where Hubert would go, and Cadeau was starting to sit wider and wider swaths of time going down the stretch. And so last night, what ended up happening was North Carolina had blown yet another lead. And we're going to get to Oates and his philosophy in a second, but North Carolina had blown another lead, and what Hubert decided to do was he wanted more offense on there. So instead of going with Trimble, instead of going with Cadeau, he chose to go with Paxton Wojcik. So on the double teams, you notice that Wojcik was opposite wing of Baycott. Now, I don't think that North Carolina took full advantage of that, because if you get the ball there, you put Alabama in a 1-guard-and-2 situation. And if you notice Alabama on that weak side where Wojcik was, and then Carolina had a guy in the corner, you would see the defender is splitting. He's splitting the two. So that's either one more swing on a hard closeout. There's all kinds of things if you can get it there. A couple times Baycott just simply either forced a shot or he turned the ball over. There was the one where he turned back to the middle right into the help. And I think he saw Wojcik, and then he kind of fumbled the ball, and Alabama went up. And I think that's when Alabama might have went up by 5 or 7 in the second half. So those things were happening. And what did Carolina do? They stopped throwing the ball in the post. That was part of the reason. The second part of the reason was ball pressure by Alabama. This is where Hubert Davis, and this is not a blame game for all those who are, Hubert Davis was out-coached. Let's stop. A lot of this was time and situation. So with R.J. Davis shooting as poor as he shot, 4 for 20 for the field, 0 for 9 for 3, what the play was for Carolina, and you saw them early in the game trying to do this, was R.J. Davis could not be your primary ball handler. We talked about this during the ACC tournament of teams trying to make R.J. Davis the primary ball handler because it takes away from his offense. So Hubert's decision was, I'm not going back with Cadeau. I'm not going back with Trimble. Paxton Wojcik certainly is not a primary ball handler. And so what he did was he went big and went with Jalen Withers, which forced R.J. Davis into being the primary ball handler for the rest of the game in a game where he was already struggling. So the big difference with that, with a guy like R.J. Davis, and when he's struggling like this, why you don't want him being a primary ball handler, because Carolina, because of guys like Baycott, and because of the actions that Hubert Davis runs, you can essentially stampede RJ, which helps him get into the lane, right? So if I play him off the ball, he's coming off of actions, whether you're in trail, whether you're switching it, it doesn't matter. What it does is it gives him space to stampede into the paint. Well, by him being a primary ball handler, you lose that, which is fine if he's shooting the ball better. But he wasn't. And Alabama was not allowing him to beat them straight off of the dribble. And so this is where Hubert's decision is, I can go big and just hope I bludgeon Bama by stopping them on the defensive end, something that I had struggled with, or I go small and we're just going to have to get RJ and say, RJ, come off here. I know you're struggling, but I'm going to help you. You're either going to get to the free throw line, which he didn't do a bad job of last night when you consider how poorly he was shooting. Either you're going to get to the free throw line or we're going to open you up for three. And then we hope when you hit one that, you know, the top comes off of the basket, because a lot of times it's simply, I just need to see one go in. But Hubert decided to go large. And what happened was, and sometimes games are defined by these little pockets. And there was a pocket where I believe Estrada gets the layup. Carolina goes up by 3. Estrada gets the layup, cuts it to 1. And then the screen and roll action involves Withers. Probably should have involved Armando, but it involved Withers. What happened with that, and this is where the lineup, Oates dictating the lineup to Hubert hurts Hubert. If you go guard on that, and that's a pick and pop guard, and or you run that action, and that's a pick and pop, and that's Cormac Ryan, then Alabama doesn't double. Is what they did was they fouled the ball, basically saying, we're going to make Withers a decision maker and hope that he makes the wrong decision. Because the right decision actually is, because of how hard Alabama doubled, he is a dribble and a half away from having 2 feet in the paint. There is the decision. But Jalen Withers, who is not thought of as a three-point shooter, decides to shoot a three-pointer. And he misses. And if you watch that game, when Carolina missed perimeter shots, especially on an unbalanced floor, did you see how many layups Alabama got? How many transition threes they got when Carolina would come back and they could get the ball to Griffin and Griffin would hit a 3? Those type of things happen, and that's what happened there. So now Alabama gets them. Carolina has the wrong person shooting by bad decision making, and they come in now. Carolina is starting the possession in transition defense, and then Alabama runs their actions, and Nelson, who had been hot the entire game, they throw it inside to him, and Withers again, and again, this is not to pick on Withers, we're not blaming Withers, but he's late on help, which allows Nelson to get the 3-point play. But a lot of that is dictated by Oates. And because Oates made Hubert make that decision of, I'm going to have you put out an uncomfortable lineup. Either you're going to put Cadeau out there and I am going to slump off. You're going to put Seth out there and try to have him help mitigate the primary ball handling, and I'm going to pressure the dickens out of him, right? And I know that now, because you went to Paxton Wojcik when you did, I know you're not going back with those two. I know you're not, because you would have went back with them in that situation and not with Wojcik. And again, this is not a right. I cannot stress this enough. This is not a right or wrong decision. So many fans want to make these coaches' decisions into right and wrong. It's not a right and wrong decision. Again, it's time, circumstance, matchups. But this is Oates and his analytical, more NBA philosophy and recruiting to that forced it. I'm going to have 1 million possessions, which makes this a game of runs. which means whether Carolina gets up 7 or 8 or 9, we're at a pace where it's a game of runs. No different than the NBA. So I'm going to have my chance to get my little 7-0 run, my little 11-2 run, my little 10-3 run. I'm going to get those chances too. Not just Carolina, because that's the way we're playing the pace. That's all analytical. He said this when he first got the job. Well, I studied the way they do it in the NBA. There's some things I like. There's some things you got to tweak because it's a college game, but there's some things I like. I can recruit to this, and I can play this style. And if I get the right matchup in the NCAA tournament, I can get to the Final Four. And that's the way they kind of played that. And so Carolina, as poorly as R.J. Davis shot, with a minute something left, Carolina is still winning. So this is where decision-making made a difference. And Oates and his philosophy and how he recruits made a difference, forcing Hubert's hand. Now, Hubert could have made a different decision, could have gone to Trimble and could have gone to Cadeau, and there would have been another set of problems. I do think if there's one thing that I would have done different as a coach than Hubert was, when they ran the high ball screen, I would have ran it with Ryan, because that would have made the defender stay true to Ryan, because they would not have left him to double the ball out the hands of Davis. And that's that. And you know, it's easy to sit in your living room or in your home office like I was last night and say these things, because you know a lot of it certainly is Monday morning quarterbacking. But I was kind of confused even in real time while the ball action involved Withers. When Carolina did not have anyone that was going to be able to beat, they didn't have any wings or bigs that was going to be able to beat Alabama off of the dribble. So now I would want it to be a shooter to keep that true. And, you know, I think that was the only thing I questioned, because you didn't put in a second ball handler to allow R.J. Davis to play off the ball. You made him the primary ball handler, which is fine. There's a million reasons why, if you ask Hubert why he would have, and those answers that he would give is perfectly fine. It's just in that ball screen action that has to be Carmack Ryan, and it cannot be Jalen Withers, or it needs to be Armando Bacot, and he dives and doesn't pop, and he dives, or if he does pop, he's not shooting that. He's popping the swing, or you can pop into a DHO, and maybe that DHO was with Ryan, and then off of the pop, you kind of zoom that. You kind of zoom to the basket and go that way. But kudos to Nate Oates, because, again, his style, his philosophy forced Carolina to have a lineup out there that had flaws in it, that had some things that made them decision makers, and put your best player who's already struggling shooting into a position that was pretty tough. So that was my breakdown of the game. Again, please don't come out here and start screaming about whose fault it was or wasn't. It wasn't a fault thing. It was a coaching thing where if you've ever coached and you've ever been in that front seat, you're always going to be put in decision-making positions, and you just hope that in your decision-making position that you have the guys out there who are strong decision makers in a game like that. And for North Carolina, there was just that little 7, 8, 9 second stretch where there were some things I'm certainly sure they would like to have done different. This is Mark Washington from MTC Media.